Popular culture in late Victorian England created anxieties amongst the middle classes. Literary works such as Penny Dreadfuls were thought to have a pernicious influence on the minds of young working-class boys. This presentation aims to discuss the issue of the penny dreadful and the rise of the romantic genre in the context of the late Victorian society, whilst considering Robert Louis Stevenson's defence, which he states that drama is the poetry of conduct and romance is the poetry of circumstance. Aidan Day suggests that indications soon began to be perceptible of a tendency to seek subjects and forms of expressions in a wider, more passionate and more natural sphere of nature and emotion in the Victorian period, and that romantic resistance against early 19th century neoclassicism was a reaction to a socio-political revolution leading to the literary revolution. In applying this theory to the penny dreadful, I interpreted conduct to mean the organisation of a crime or event consciously, as opposed to falling into an unavoidable circumstance in which characters react to rather than create problems and events for themselves. An example of two penny dreadfuls that warrant this comparison are Reynolds' The Body Snatchers and Stevenson's The Body Snatcher. Reynolds' story is depicted from the view of a middle-class victim, portraying the lower classes as criminal and the creators of their own violent conduct, whereas Stevenson's tale is showered with mystery and circumstantial reactions leading to a guilty consciousness of the crime that's been committed in the story. Middle-class literature of the late Victorian period told tales of moral triumph, nationalism and imperial values, whereas working-class literature, like the penny dreadful, told of mischief and crime, which were thought at the time to have led to several murderous crimes. Far from being fantastical and circumstantial, the middle classes saw the dreadfuls as diversions from a path towards being full citizens of nation and empire, and so produced articles and arguments against such pernicious literature as the penny dreadful. The influence of the penny dreadful is an article produced by the Southland Times in 1888. And it first tells of the tale of two boys who committed a murder of a Salvation Army member and then admitted it coldly to the minister of the army. The article speaks of their brains being saturated and diseased by pernicious literature which now floods the world. It states that the boys were imitating characters and revealing their notoriety of the crimes that they had committed. In Stevenson's A Gossip on Romance, it states that no art produces illusion, and that in theatre we never forget that we are in the theatre, and while we read a story we sit wavering between two minds, now merely clapping our hands at the merit of the performance, now condensing to take an active part in fancy with the characters, but the characters are still themselves, they are not us. The rise of concern by the middle classes was partly a reaction to the Second Reform Act giving working class men an electoral majority at the time. Seen as weak-minded, the working class reading such violent literature as the penny dreadful was seen as a dangerous act and a potential for non-moralistic ideologies to spread into other areas of society through a connection between reading and degeneration. Terry Eagleton suggests that ideology is not a set of doctrines, rather it signifies the way men live out their roles in class society, the values, ideas and images which tie them by their social functions and so prevent them from the true knowledge of society as a whole. Martin Baker argues that middle-class society approached this crisis degeneration of the working classes with a paternalistic attitude. I want to save the vulnerable working classes from themselves by promoting a safer, more imperialistic kind of literature in order to prevent a loss of morals, religion, respect and ultimately civilization. Baker states that the Industrial Revolution and the consolidation of factory capitalism had made social, political and intellectual disciplines of the working classes a more crucial feature in working class Victorian England. The issue of the penny dreadful gives us a better insight into the wider issues and anxieties of the late Victorian period. It shows us that there was a crisis of identity by the middle class gentlemen and a fear of degeneration of the new majority of an ever-rising working class in Victorian society.